Lakesh and Veritas, everyone, sending you the frequencies of oneness and truth. You are now tuning into Of the Sun's Suncast weekly podcast, bringing you elevated topics focused on expanding ourselves and humanity into becoming the truth and moving into oneness. And we're coming all the way live from One Mind Frequency. We have Tavars of the Sun, the architect of this vibrant organism, who provides of the Sun-ers wisdom and guidance so they can find the truth to be free. I am Tavars of the Sun, certified instructor and practitioner of the Sun modalities, and the creative genius behind Of the Sun's artwork, programs, and sessions. And we have Jessica of the Sun, author of 50 Women Anthology, and an advocate for Of the Sun, currently learning the teachings. So in Lakesh and Veritas, ladies.
In Lakesh and Veritas, to Jessica in Germany, and to Tavars here in the
US of A.
Yes, to all of us who are in the Northern Hemisphere.
In Lakesh and Veritas, Northern Hemisphere folks.
Okay, so, well, today's topic, it is affecting more than just the Northern Hemisphere. This is worldwide, and it's literally a state of emergency regarding our children and the current targeting and weaponization of sexualization towards our children. So we have some wonderful topics here. One of the first things I'd like to share is that I have a variety of different articles that speaks and shows evidence how there is most certainly an agenda at play that is targeting our children, and there is a hypersexualization and indoctrination that is taking place at adolescency. So I'm going to kick things off with something that I came across, and I've been seeing it more and more. I like to start this off by saying, be free, do what you want, you know, in terms of how you want to present yourself and what your sexuality is. However, when it comes to children, our children must be protected. So there is something called drag queen story time. I don't know if you all have heard of it, but it's a big thing now, and there are different chambers in all the major cities of the US where libraries are hosting events where families are invited to bring their 3-year-old, 4-year-olds to have someone dressed in drag read stories to them. Now, not so long ago, men in women's clothing peddling homosexual propaganda to small children would have prompted some phone calls. However, instead, nowadays it's cool to be neutral or even applauded. So I can clearly see that this is something that is a virtue signaling, literally in full effect. So to kind of give you all an idea of this, I'm going to read a little bit of information, the bio about Drag Queen Story Time, so you have a little more understanding. So Drag Queen Story Hour is just what it sounds like. And by the way, this is read directly from the website. Drag Queen Story Hour is just what it sounds like. Drag queens reading stories to children in libraries, schools, and bookstores. DQSH abbreviated, captures the imagination and play of the gender fluidity of childhood and gives kids glamorous, positive, and unabashedly queer role models. In spaces like this, kids are able to see people who defy rigid gender restrictions and imagine a world where people can present as they wish, where dress up is real. So where this becomes even more of a moral issue is the behavior exuded within these events. I have seen live footage of some of these individuals teaching the children how to twerk and other sexual innuendos that are used during the reading of these stories that raises question marks above my head, and I don't even have children. You know, so again, this is one of the many examples of children being targeted at a young age, and there's sexual agenda. So I'm going to keep it moving and jump to the next article. I have two more, and the next one deals with stories of promiscuous toys that uh, actually the mothers have been up in arms uh, petitioning some of these toys. So one of them is a toy from the company Hasbro, and this is from a movie called Trolls. I don't recall the name of the recent movie. Oh, here it is, Trolls World Tour. So this was a movie that was released and during the time of the pandemic. Everyone's in their houses, so all the children are watching it and they love it, they love it, they love it. And you may even remember Trolls growing up with the with the colorful hair and their funny looking noses, and they're practically nude. So the issue lies where the function button of this doll is placed in the private area, which is rather odd because usually you'd find a button on the hand or maybe even the stomach. So I have an article here from CBS News speaking on how Hasbro had to remove the doll from store shelves. And I'll keep this as brief as possible. Toy maker Hasbro says it is removing a Trolls doll from store shelves after people complained that a button on the doll is inappropriately placed under its skirt. The decision comes after an online petition was created urging stores to remove the Trolls World Tour Giggle and Sing Poppy doll. The petition has amassed nearly 300,000 signatures. When you push this button on the doll's private, she gasps and giggles. This is not okay for a child's toy. This toy needs to be removed from our stores, reads the petition. And this petition was addressed to stores such as Target, Walmart, Amazon, Dollar General, and Family Dollar Tree stores. So there are videos online that have gone viral of parents demonstrating uh, the pressing of the button and how it's just all out of order. So there's no conspiracy here. This is mom straight up, look, this is not mom approved. Take it off the shelves. So that's the second one. And our third one, this is another promiscuous toy, which again, this builds my case on there is an agenda because there's too many coincidences happening. So this is with a toy called the LOL dolls, like LOL, laugh out loud. And there's these cute, chubby looking baby dolls with these big, cute, glittery eyes, and you get to dress them. So of course they are partially nude. And what happens, or there was another viral video of a mom noticing that when you take this doll and dip the doll in ice cold water, uh, there is some type of promiscuous clothing that appears on the body. So, you know, the novelty of sinking an item in water and then something magically appearing, that's the novelty for the children. But there is no warning of exactly what they will see. So here's another article. This is again a news station in Mobile, Alabama, speaking on the idea, because this has gotten the attention of many. Mobile, Alabama, WPMI. Some parents on the Gulf Coast and across the country are raising an uproar over a popular children's toy, LOL surprise dolls. You may have seen viral videos of dolls being dipped in water and displaying what some consider inappropriate clothing. WPMI wanted to see for ourselves what parents are so concerned about, so we bought 3 different LOL surprise dolls. The packaging says there is a secret message, but parents say they didn't know the secret message would possibly be provocative. So, quote unquote, whoa, oh my gosh, shouted one parent. One after another, parents across social media are in shock after discovering their daughter's LOL surprise dolls change into what they're calling lingerie. So when you open them up, you don't have any clothing. The problem, parents say, is when you dip them into the cold water. And again, it goes on and on about this idea of how it's highly deemed inappropriate for children. So I have to ask, what is going on? Well, I think I know what's going on. However, I'd love to hear the higher perspective. Lauta, your thoughts on this, please.
This is furthering the confusion of the parents and the ones of us who are living on the planet, many parents are really not equipped to be able to determine what is appropriate and what isn't. The idea of gender fluidity is not a wrong idea, but the idea of wearing artificial things, artificial breasts, artificial hair, artificial lashes, artificial disguising paint on your face, and then teaching someone to gain attention by um, moving your rear end in a certain way, which is called twerping. All of these things are cultivation, and these are ways in which our young lose their innocence. And the parents who participate, who are often thinking that they're in support of gender fluidity, there is no question that people are free to choose and that there's no wrong for those who are consenting adults.
Mm-hmm.
There is a difference between making the brain connection with body parts and with identifying things that are not real, like blonde wigs and false eyelashes and fake breasts and fake derrieres. We can easily find the solutions to these things when people are confused by just looking at nature. What happens in nature when one creature of another kind, a squirrel, goes and tries to do something to a bird? Don't they scream, yell, and fight and save their children? What happens when something tries to aggress a baby cub? What happens in a chicken coop when one chicken tries to aggress another? We should look to this to see that it is our duty to protect our young. And these ideas of the idea of cultivating sexual energies when the brain is still so pliable, when the brain is still determining where its pleasure centers are. If they're learning at 3 to go under the skirt to make a pleasure move, then this then becomes how they get pleasure, and they don't learn the other ways that you get pleasure. So it's not about being puritanical, it's about it's inappropriate to steal the innocence of our children. So the adults who are reading story time, just like the Boy Scouts or just like the priests, all the ones who are on record as having been those who take advantage of our children, they are cultivating the brain as it's still developing. The brain of a child, of human children, is not fully developed. Most humans don't even finish growing until they're after 18. So the brain is still being developed. The pleasure centers are still being developed. If we allow cultivation by those who are off balance themselves, we can only get if you start off wrong, you can only get a wrong result. So this is not about being against anyone's sexual orientation. This is about protecting the innocence of the children. What are we in agreement with? Are we in agreement with people being dressed up to look like monsters instead of humans, with all of this hair on their face, through the eyelashes and the glue, the paint around the eyes? None of that is real. None of that is what is natural. None of that is nature. None of that is what a child should be exposed to. The fake hair, the preference for blonde or black or red, none of that is what is being brought forward in the story time is not the real transition of one human to another. It is a made up construct that has been produced that in most cases looks a little scary, and it's inciting in someone behavior that would not be appropriate under any conditions to cultivate in the innocent. So that's what I have to say about that. Jessica, do you have anything?
That was quite profound. I don't know how to follow that, but you're absolutely right. I actually had an article that I wanted to bring up it was in Cosmopolitan magazine of all places, but it was over 20 different references of sexual innuendos in Disney movies.
Oh,
And I think all of us remember being a kid and, watching the Disney movies. I mean, that was a huge thing. I mean, I think the first movie I ever went to go see at a movie theater was The Land Before Time, the dinosaur movie.
right.
Fortunately, there haven't been any innuendos found in A Land Before Time, but in movies like The Little Mermaid, The Lion King, there's pictures like phallic symbols, pictures of like naked women. In Aladdin, there's allegedly a picture of a naked woman, and they've actually taken screenshots of these to show where this comes up in the animation. And something that I brought up to, I think it was you, Leota, recently, was about subliminal advertising in the 80s. I think, if you think back to the 1980s, for those of us that were, remember that era, one of the things that came to light in terms of truth was that there were subliminal messages being put out in advertising, and that every time you would have a video running frame by frame by frame, because that's how film is shot, they would slip in messages between the frames to the point where the human eye doesn't really detect it. But supposedly the brain can get the message that's contained inside this material subconsciously. So this is pretty serious. When you think about these Disney movies, you have a 5-year-old girl, for example, or 5-year-old boy watching the movies, and there's a scene in The Little Mermaid where the priest that's marrying the prince and the Ariel has an erection. And it's like, you're a little 5-year-old and you see something like that, and you see the private area, it looks different than what you're used to. It starts to confuse you a little bit. And I actually remember when I was a kid, my friends and I found some of those references. It was like a school narrative. It was on the playground. Someone said, "Oh, in the Little Mermaid, you could see the genitals of the priest." And so we were laughing about it, and then we went to somebody's house and we tried to find it, and we did find it. And when you think about, like, your kids are watching this stuff and their brains are developing and they're absorbing all of this from movies that are meant to be for children. So, and then don't even get me started on the sexualization of Disney princesses. That's up until the more recent ones, that was a problem for many years, but that's a whole nother podcast topic.
These things are so true, and I'm aware of subliminal, the connections and the actual science that shows that the brain does pick up things that are not at the conscious level. So I have not only the science with that, but I also have looked at the material that you're talking about from the Disney movies. And what we want to make sure you understand is that there's nothing wrong with genitals in the context of, you live on a farm, you see what things that don't wear clothes look like and what they do and what their behavior is. That's all appropriate. It is actually this changing it from nature and what is natural and what naturally happens, that during the time of growth and during the time where nourishment should take place. And if children live on a farm and they see what happens with animals on the farm, or even see their parents, that's a different thing than something dressed up like something man-made that's scary, showing them to behave in a way that's aggressive, even if it's aggressively shaking their behinds. That these things are objectionable. Where is the concept of wholesomeness? Where is the concept that we should be fighting tooth and nail and prepared to protect our young no matter what? Where is that concept in this conglomeration of stories? Where is it that this is being allowed by the people who make the movies? There, of course, are people going over the movies frame by frame by frame and being in agreement with this. This is not the first time that these cartoons are being drawn by people who are in the industry, that have been in the industry and are getting away with things. And it's been pointed out, and it's on YouTube. How come it hasn't been removed? How come you can still remember, that somebody thought it was funny to show, I've seen things with naked harem girls, or just completely inappropriate based on the story. But it just lets us know that Disney is not our savior, that the libraries are not saving our children, that we cannot look to the ones in any particular gender fluid group to be the ones to save or cultivate our children into the next generation of people who are in agreement. This is no different than um, people going to other countries and giving help only if the person will be in agreement with their religion. You know, I'll give you water if you are in agreement with my ideology. So this is like, I'll come to the library if you're in agreement with my ideology. If you allow me to uh, present my case in all of its artificialness and influence the children and cultivate them in the way that I see fit. So instead of in the way that nature and life itself has brings us, the children automatically are born sexual beings. But that aspect needs to develop and grow as every other aspect does. Just because a child grows into a 14-year-old and has a 14-year-old body with all working parts doesn't mean that they now should be cultivated towards any particular sexual orientation if they're neutral. And if they're not neutral, there's no reason why they should be persecuted. At the same time, there is confusion in our parenting. There's confusion in what should be taking place. There needs to be this sense of we should protect our lineage. We should protect our nephews, our nieces. We should protect our aged people. I have reports of many things happening in senior homes to the seniors. So these are things, this sexual aggression towards the elderly and the children is epidemic. And we do need to know how to think about it. We have to ask ourselves the question, are we in agreement with cultivating our children before they are readiness into a sexual environment and allowing predators to be the teachers? Are we in agreement with that? And if we are not, we should make sure that wholesomeness and decency and innocence are upheld as civilized beings in a civilized world. Of course, the degradation of our morals and our sensibilities begins with how we treat our children.
Very profound. Um, I have a question, and I feel like you somewhat touched on the idea. I'm thinking of things from the perspective of, let's say I'm a parent. You know, I enjoy looking at it from other people's view. Clearly, we do live in an overly sexualized world. Um, Growing up, my mother was super protective of me from that. You know, close your eyes, you know, in the sex scene in the movie, and I get it. You know? But I felt that there were aspects of it that were a little excessive. However, I do know that there is a need for this protection, you know, protecting the mind, especially in those early stages. So, do you have like any recommendations for parents out there that are navigating to navigate this?
There are many things, there's such a variety of things that happen naturally with the children. There are many things that children will do that arises from them naturally. But what I'd like to point out is that people who do abuse and still innocence, often worse, their innocence was stolen.
Mm-hmm.
And they were abused in this lifetime or in previous lifetimes, and that they are producing another generation of abusers if this cultivation continues. So yes, we should protect them, but we should not be, uh, we should know that the human body is not wrong or ugly, and that sexual contact is not a terrible thing, but obsession with sex and constantly bringing it to the forefront as if it is all that life is inappropriate. Much of this is driven by the food. We're overstimulated all the time. We hear too much music. We listen to too much chatter, there's too much talking, the brain is overstimulated all the time, and people have clients who come in who cannot stop masturbating, who cannot stop being sexual, but it's an imbalance in the brain. And many times
Yes.
this can be corrected. Often it's in the diet. Often it's in the soy. It's in the soy is in everything. It's in your tuna fish. It's in your mayonnaise.
Even in the baby formula.
It's in baby formula. And it does change. If any of you who are interested or listening, go to the Weston A. Price Foundation and you may see the many, many decades of research that shows what happens to gender and sexual orientation to boys and girls, and the estrogen and the testosterone are changed just by what's in our diet. So there's too much stimulation, there's too much sugar, there's too much things that are eaten that are not actually food. You know, not everything that is eaten is food. We have to look at that. And these things do change the brain balance. And then the second brain, which is in the gut. And so some of that does lead to behavior. When we put someone back on a solid diet of vegetables, we see that this kind of behavior drops down, but it's not just one thing. It is how they were cultivated and oriented as well, and what their past, this lifetime and other lifetimes had in it. So the problem is bigger, but it doesn't really matter, because if you're protecting your child, you can, if you make that the priority, that is a way that that can happen. I made it a priority to protect my children, and your mother made it a priority, even if she went too far. And even like Jessica said, most of us learn things on the playground that, you know, would have been better if we hadn't learned, but
Yeah.
we learned them in that way, not by a 35-year-old dressed in artificial aspects, teaching us from the point of view of an adult. So there is a difference there. Does that answer the question?
Most definitely. And I feel like your response can help many others out there who are experiencing this as a parent. So we're going to go ahead and take a break. Come back right after this brief message. Stay elevated. Stay within one mind.
This idea of being able to give in Lakesh, which represents correction and is in fact a release of suffering, if we just think about that. If we just think about the fact that as we say in Lakesh, I am you and you are me, and we acknowledge what we have ignored, it releases some level of suffering. And now that has grown into a much bigger, greater concept that is revolving around releasing suffering in a very real way. And it creates the solution in the instance of giving it. As you recognize, in a world where the truth is not recognized, where living things are thought not to be living, where people are not really considered, where women and children and old are not considered, or the grass or the trees or the bees or the wasp are not considered, but they're all living here with full awareness and full intelligence and full consciousness, with things to share with us. As the trees said, they are here to learn patience. What are we here? What is our lesson? What is it that we are here to learn?
And we are back. Suncast podcast. And we're talking on the state of our children right now, and the necessity to protect the purity and the innocence of our children in today's times. Lao-Tzu, I understand you had some additional thoughts you wanted to share on the idea.
There were several things I want to mention about this, but what really comes to mind are the laws that are being passed, specifically in Australia and in California, that lawmakers, in an effort to protect certain parts of the population, are removing the protection, minimizing and condoning the stealing of innocence, or those who are oriented towards pedophilia. And this will lead harm to our children. The ones who participate in this kind of experience are culpable, the lawmakers, the legislatures, the libraries, all who are in the agreement. We must care for our lineage. We must care for our children in the future. We cannot allow this behavior to devour our children and the beast eat the next generation. How can a civilization exist if the children are not protected, not honored, not brought to a level where they are nourished appropriately, not nourished on someone else's imbalance? So this also leads, there are many stories like that. And I think Jessica has one you'd like to share, Jessica.
Yeah, actually, this is an interesting thing to consider, and it does have to do with the Constitution. And it's so, interestingly enough, when we think about some of these things, like the crotch part of that doll, where when you press the button, she makes little giggling noises and things like that. There's one word that comes to mind when we're talking about all these things, and especially these like explicit content that the children are being exposed to in a pretty much a subliminal way, is obscenity. And the notion of like obscenity has been very debated throughout our constitutional history even, and like whether or not a certain artistic expression or piece of content, a film, a book, literature is considered obscene. And in the 1970s, people really didn't know how to judge that. It was judged by community. So if you were in a smaller community and people thought that whatever book or movie you were showing was obscene, it was not allowed to be shown. And so I'm not going to go into the whole history of the Supreme Court case, but I do want to kind of tell parents that are listening to this that even the Supreme Court uses guidelines to define what is appropriate and not appropriate, basically. And they have something called the Miller test. And this is kind of a very watered down version of a lengthy explanation. But if you're a parent and you're looking at something like that Disney movie that has the naked woman in the cloud, or the drag queen story hour, or the the toys that you're with the lingerie, you can ask yourself 3 questions, and I'll kind of adapt these for a more common use. The first question is, if you are applying contemporary community standards, would this thing be considered offensive? So would people in your parenting community as well find that, for example, the surprise the kids are getting with the little dolls are lingerie? Is that something that the rest of the community would also consider to be offensive? And the second question is whether or not it depicts or describes like sexual conduct that violates any sort of like child pornography laws that you're aware of. And that's an important thing to consider, because nobody can fool me into thinking that when this doll, for example, with a button in the private area, was going through the product development and testing process, which is an extremely lengthy process. The certification for creating a children's toy and being able to release it for mass consumption of children is very strict. And it's hard to believe that that could have been overlooked at all the different levels of that. And some people would argue, and I think I saw this in one of the articles or postings about that particular video that Tavars had shared, was that somebody said this is child pornography. So could that even be argued as that? And that's a thing to consider. And the third question would be, is this thing that's created or presented like lacking, is it for the purpose of like educational value? For example, like sexual education in school, could that be considered obscene or something kids shouldn't see? At certain points they're exposed to it in the education system. They're exposed to it in art. They might take an art class and see a nude woman in a painting, for example. But is this thing that the kids are looking at, is there like significant literary, artistic, political, or scientific value of it? And if that's not the case, then I would say it's probably not the right thing for them to have in their hands. So, like I said, that has an extensive like legal background. But if anybody listening to this is looking for a way that actual like attorneys or even all the way up to the Supreme Court would look at certain, like if this doll was part of a lawsuit for obscenity, what would the test be that would be applied? And I think parents should be actually applying that test as well to a lot of these things. So I hope that helps all of you.
I think this is really good for those who want to have a legal understanding of what's taking place and what's going on. What comes to mind for me is even the definition of things like lingerie. So when children are small, we put our children in pajamas. We don't put our girls in bikini pajamas and our boys in warm pajamas where they can stay warm and be sleep comfortably at night. So it wouldn't be appropriate to see um, a girl doll in high heels and fishnet stockings and wearing something that was uncomfortable, and then see the boy doll in a regular pair of comfortable pajamas that he could rest and grow and sleep in. These are small notations I want to make as well. Even though it's accepted in our society to wear 5-inch heels and fishnets and wigs and all of that is acceptable, it doesn't make it right. It's just acceptable within the community of the planet we currently live in, but it's not the truth of our existence. It's not, we don't have to walk around on our toes 5 inches high, and we don't have to be in uncomfortable clothing. And if we're treating one gender different, then that is cause for alarm. If they both don't get in comfortable, warm, clean pajamas, that's a problem. So why are we showing something different than that? With the girls and not with the boys. I think that's important. I also want to bring up one more point, and this is on the point of we have to stop believing in things that we know are not true. There is a huge push as it is time for people to go back to school, and many, many people want to move back into the environment of school on the COVID planet we now live on. And I want to bring to mind things that parents all know already. I had 4 children, and when they first went to nursery school, they would come back with whatever they caught from the children they had not been exposed to. And my children, we didn't have any pets, but my children came back with communicable diseases that were caught through the pets of the other children who were in their class. And in the beginning, they were only in class 1 or 2 days a week when they were really little. And we spent a lot of time healing them of the things they caught. So we should not forget what we know is true. Diseases that are communicable will move between children, whether they're 6 feet apart or not. They have a lot of things going on with their behavior that make them touch and involve themselves in mucous membranes and leave their germs around other things. When they change classes, they are paying attention. They may not wear their mask. The mask may be infected. There's just so many things. Anybody who's ever had chickenpox or measles or any kind of cold or flu, let us not forget what we do know. Just because this is something different, it still applies. It's still something that's contagious. And in many cases, children will take home to the parents what it is that they have been exposed to at school. And then the parents and the grandparents hopefully have the immune system that can support it, so that our children don't become orphans because of the rush to get them out of the house and back to school. So there is that. And I wanted to make sure I mentioned that we should not forget what we know to be true. even if we don't know everything, even if you are not the Surgeon General, even if you don't have the latest information on COVID, there are some things you do know. Children will communicate with each other in such a way where they catch what they have. They will bring it home to you, and that their immune system is important. Your immune system is important. These are things you already know. These are things that are, protecting the health may mean that you protect yourself by finding alternative ways of educating your children.
I'm seeing how much of what we spoke of today, it's such a large issue, so to say. It's bigger than what we can discuss in one podcast. And hence the broad brushstrokes. But I do see, regarding the idea that you just shared about the children returning back to school, and this idea, well, actually, across the board, there's this theme of accountability and responsibility of the parents, the overseers, to step up and to see through the lens of truth what is actually taking place. I understand that there are some parents who are anticipating the return of their children to go back to school. And in that state of desire of not wanting to be responsible, it's overriding the awareness or the common sense, I would say, of the communicable disease amongst children and how easy it is to transfer. So again, I'm seeing that accountability and responsibility, and for parents to step up, not just parents, but all adults or overseers and watchers and guardians, to step up into what they understand to be truth. You have any thoughts on that?
I'd like to kind of end our conversation today about this by saying, we permit this. We permit Disney to do what it does and has done for decades. We are permitting, we as the people, the parents, the ones who are here, who pay for the toys, that keep the toy companies open, that watch the movies, that keep the billions of dollars flowing into these establishments, and they feel very emboldened by their behavior, so they continue to do it because they feel that we're in agreement with it. And the reality is that if we don't stop it, we are. That we have the power to shut down every company, never visit another library, to do whatever we need to do to make the point. By banding together, the point can be made. This world does revolve around money. If you remove the money, which is in your pocket, and you give it to them, it makes a point. And that point is usually one that will change the course and the direction of a company. So that's what I have to share about this. And I thank everyone for listening. I hope that we have answered some of the questions in your mind. The rash and there's really more than a rash. There is something happening in our world where the children are being abused, they're being sexually abused, they're being trafficked, they're being stolen, they're being used for transplants. There's evidence all over the internet. This is happening, and it's happening to a degree that speaks directly to the ones of us who are the protectors. It speaks to us, not so much to the villain, but to the ones who allow the villain in the house.
Drop the mic.
Yeah.
All right. So chime in the comments section. Any thoughts, comments on this idea? We look forward to hearing you all and hope that this has been expansive. And we leave you in Lakesh and Veritas.
In Lakesh and Veritas.
In Lakesh and Veritas.